This is both as scary and as not scary as I thought it was going to be. I'm so excited to be doing this. This is wild. I was looking for a way to spend my weekend and looking for a way to talk about this cool thing that I did. Because, you know, it's cool to be proud of yourself. This was something I spent a good amount of time on, and I have an excuse to talk about it. So here's the situation. Between late April and late June of this year, I wrote a full orchestral score for the very first time. Now, I had some previous experience arranging, but definitely never on this scale. I wrote this score about episodes 138 through 140 of Venture Forth D&D, which most of you, I'm sure, in this chat are fans of the show. But if you're not a fan of the show, fix that. And if you are, you know how easy it is to be inspired by their incredible storytelling and wonderful community, which I'm so lucky to be part of such like a vibrant fan community, which has inspired me to create across spectrums and mediums out of awe and love for the show and the community. I did most of the overarching plot discussion of episodes 138 through 140 on the YouTube video that I made of the score when I first finished it. Shameless plug for youtube.com/@marinikom, MARINICOM. Shameless plug, you know. The plan for this, though, is to get more in-depth into each part. Like what scenes, what characters, moments, themes were translated into what parts of the score. So if you're a show fan, huge spoilers for those episodes, and if you want to catch up on all things Venture Forth, check out their YouTube channel, Venture Forth D&D. Seriously though, if you love storytelling, if you love RPGs, or even just like friends sitting around a table, I can't recommend their show enough. The plan is to listen through, I think, one time, and then we'll break it down. We'll go piece by piece, break it down musically, as well as plot-wise. Also, this is my first stream, like, ever, so I'll beseech you to bear with me through any technical difficulties. I feel like we should be good. I've practiced this a couple times over the past few days, just, you know, talking to myself on Streamlab and going, that should work. But I suppose without further ado, 5 minutes of rambling later, I'll go ahead and move us over to the cool land where my application stream is set up. Hold, please. Did we make it? Can everyone see that? Are we winning? So now if I'm looking down here, it's not because I'm filled with deep shame, it's because I'm reading the chat and making sure that the stream isn't broken. I suppose we'll give a listen through, and I will shut my mouth just for this one. We'll give a listen through, and then we'll break it down and bust it up. Okay. Let me know if you can hear that once it starts playing. Yes! We did it! That's the most I'm not gonna talk tonight. This clocks in at, because all YouTube videos need clickbait, I say it clocks in at 200 measures. That's including the repeats. So it really, like, if we're counting bars of original content, it's like 180 something. If we're counting the repeats, it's over 200, but it's about 5.5, 6 minutes of music. Am I crazy? Yes. But we're not going to talk about that. When I started it, did I intend it to be that long? No. But I just sort of kept rewatching those episodes, and it kept coming back to me. If any of you are musically trained, especially compositionally trained, I know this is littered with compositional error. I know it's notationally a nightmare. The only reason I really am sort of able to do this is because I play a bunch of instruments, so I know enough to, like, write about it. But I am well aware I am littered with notational errors. Probably my most egregious error, you'll definitely notice if you're a music guy, is that I never changed the key officially on paper. The key changes twice, but it makes sense to my brain to write everything in C or like the natural key, which means it's littered with funky little symbols that don't need to be there. But that's the way that my brain works, and I will not be defending that anymore. In this essay, I will. But we start in the grand old key of D. The violins get to keep that drone the whole time. Story time. Back in my early days of musicianship, I was a second violin, and what's really sad about the second violins is they never get anything fun to play. So what did I do? Give them a D to drone for like 20 measures. But the second violins do get to play around. They get to have a little fun here at some point, just maybe not right now. But some important things to note here in the very beginning to set the scene. It's episode 138. We're marching into the Capitolium. Things are tense. Things are scary. Things are immediately bad. This was the first thing I had written. I had honestly set out to just, like, think and variate on the Agents of Repair theme, which is delightful and lovely, and it starts every episode, and I'm, like, over here headbanging during the intro every week. Only giving, like, 2 bars of that. We're in 3/4 because I like everything in 3s and 6s. I only go to common time when I have to. Again, a function thing. We start building a chord. We're not doing too much here other than giving us a key, establishing this little ascending thing that happens in the B-flat clarinets. The B-flat clarinets are going to carry most of this piece. I really like the clarinet. I've never touched a wind instrument. I play a lot of string instruments and a lot of percussion instruments, but I'm really scared of wind instruments. I don't want to think about the shape that my mouth is making while I'm playing music. I really don't. But we begin this little funky little ascending thing, and if I isolate this line, so they do that, and then we keep moving up the key, and then they just do that forever. The bassoons repeat that. Shout out to the bassoon. Carrying the bass line are contrabassoon and the contrabass. Shout out to those guys. Yeah, we build the chord, and we're not doing too much here other than establishing this weird little tension. Moving forward, I remember noting, like, the incredible tension of walking to the consolatory chamber, because, like, there were all those guards there, and everything was so official, but, like, you know, if the guards were going to do their job, we wouldn't sort of be in this situation. So it was all very official, but all very tense still, that, like, this amount of people with this amount of weapons in this amount of space. So in comes the timpani for that weird little militaristic vibe. So we get little heartbeat military thing going on. Does that have a correlation to, like, I don't know, any sort of military band? No, but that, you know, it sounds official in a way that I can't articulate. So we let the B-flat clarinets continue their ascent, and once again, all we're doing here is building tension up until this point where we start these funny little tremolos on page 4. So we're just building tension through this whole section, letting the trumpets have that high note, which is going to be difficult for them to play, but that's the trumpeteer's problem. Thank you for the follow. And moving on, we get to have fun with the flutes. Now, a note on flutes. I love them. Are you really writing a thing if you don't abuse every section? This started with way less instrument lines than it ended with. We just sort of kept adding them. But I love the flutes, and they get to have this fun little playful thing going on that's mirrored in the first violins, while the second violins are sort of carrying our chord structure here. We're continuing that little ascending thing. 1 up, and we keep doing that. And then we're going to repeat this section. A note on how this software works. When a thing is in green, when a note is in that like weird little shade of green, it means that's a playable note on that instrument, but it's going to be difficult. When it's in red, like this timpani line, it means that's not a playable note on that instrument. But frankly, this is a problem for the little MIDI instruments inside my computer and not for an actual orchestra. If I was an orchestra director and or conductor, I would hate having to conduct this piece. Mostly because there's a lot of things that are really hard to play in here. Simply, this timpani line would not have been the same if I took this note up the octave. It's just deliciously deep and I like it. Yeah, so the flutes and the first violins carry this section. We repeat it. What's happening plot-wise now? In the consolatory chamber, they're sort of getting the sense that things are gonna go sideways. This is a very enclosed space, and the things can go really sideways really quickly, and thinking, like, this could be it. So we spend this time building tension, and we get to do this fun little repeat of this whole thing. So that whole section we just did, we're gonna repeat it here. But the only thing different is we're getting more movement in the violin section, and we're also introducing a fun little thing. So we're going from, I'll highlight the French horns for example, this quarter half to a dotted quarter, dotted quarter. So we're switching up the movement a little. So instead of quarter, half, now we'd go quarter, half, dotted, dotted, quarter, half, dotted, dotted. It establishes movement that we're going to hit later, and we needed to establish that earlier. But we move through this repeat, and then we let the timpani go because this is a slower moving section that we don't need that militariness for. I didn't think super hard about the chord progression or chord structure. I sort of did it by ear, but I knew where I wanted it to go, so it was easy to tap out like certain lines and then just sort of build around them, like making a sandcastle kind of. But this page is an example of the funkiest chord that ended up in here. All very normal. Back to minor. Incoming. Okay. What does that do? It builds tension. But it's a funky little chord that got stuck in there to sort of throw you off the vibe that we were in. We were very comfortably sitting in this key. We had been in one mode the whole time. Everything was really nice and chill. And we needed to shake up our confidence a little because things were bad in the plot and we can't be this comfortable in the score. So we're okay with this. Little shaky chord. Yeah, big dissonance guy. And we get to say goodbye to our French horns. Unfortunate, I love French horns. And now, note that because of the key that B-flat clarinets are written in, this little E is in fact a D. It looks like an E because that's the way the B-flat clarinets work. Did I have to put two fermatas over here? Could I have just made it two separate measures? I could have, but, you know, I didn't. Moving into this section. This is a minute of transition to bring us a whole step higher in the key. That is so incredibly unnecessary, but it's how it happened. During this point in time, like, we'd sort of settled in to the consolatory chamber, like, we, the audience, were feeling like, okay, you know, maybe it's gonna be okay. So we move into this slower, still climbing, we're repeating that little climbing thing. Now the flutes get it. Now, funny thing about the flutes. In my brain, in this piece, Thessaly's a flute. I gave them the flute. There is something, like, ethereally beautiful, but also so raw about the flute. Also, it's really identifiable in the mix of the rest of the orchestra. It's a really easily picked out sound. I wanted their voice to be super clear, to be able to pick out things that were going on. So I remember, like, the tension sort of settled in, and then Thess sort of had a moment to take it all in and go, ooh. So I give her the climbing theme here, and just a slight chance to start variating on the AOR theme, knowing that, yes, this is scary, but all my friends are here. A rope of friendship. So as we fade out the French horns, we have this little climbing thing happening in the strings as the flute takes that ascending line. And here comes the AOR theme once again. I know I started this by saying I do this because this is something I'm proud of and I like to talk about it. I did feel like a golden god writing this little chord transition. That's so delicious to me, and it might not be delicious to anybody else, but it felt like the way to do that. It felt like something I would have heard in one particular part of one particular Lord of the Rings movie. And that really came to me after the fact, but this feels like a very elvish Lord of the Rings chord change. But I felt very good about this. And now we've effectively moved closer to the key we're going to end up in. So now instead of starting our ascent on D, we're starting our ascent on E. So we've moved up one whole step, and it took us like 45 seconds of music to do that. Once again, crazy. We get out of here. Once again, the B-flat clarinets have been droning this D the entire time. So for every chord change we did, D was our root note, and it was all built around that. But now as we come out of this section, we're still droning the D, moving down. And this is the last chord in which the D will be viable. This very little sad, very little minor thing going on. For me, it was like a quiet realization that we could definitely die. And that sort of consignment to, well, okay, was important to note before we start our climbing again. So now we're in the grand old key of E. We're going to be here for most of the rest of the piece, but it did take us 45 seconds of music to get here. So now we sit in that for a little bit. We're in very high voicing right now, and this call and response is very nice. I like bouncing back that ascension between the B-flat clarinet and the flute. And now we're all together again. We bring back the cellos in full force. All right, this upcoming section, we got to talk about. I know we got to talk about all of it, but this upcoming section we got to talk about. The movement after this one has some recognizable and important themes. I really wanted to establish those any earlier because that big sweeping movement I wrote really early on in the process. And for a long time, there was absolutely nothing connecting the first big movement to the second one. And at some point in the process, I woke up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night and went, oh my God, all I have to do is write 60 seconds of transition to move up one whole step. And then that's what I did. But this transition was missing for a long time. And I wanted a way to establish those themes any earlier than the big sweeping movement where they're on full display. The flute gets this fun little playful thing. I'll isolate that line so we can hear it better. Little eighth, then we go quarter, quarter. So, the Discovery Channel butterfly nature documentary sort of dancey flute thing going on, it was important to me that this little melodic structure stay light and lighthearted because we're moving towards something big here. I wanted it to stay light, but I didn't want it to be ascending. Ascending, I would ascribe to an amount of hope that we did not have at this moment in time. It was descending, but sort of fluctuating in the same place. This is important as it's a counter melody to this fun little thing that the first violins are doing in this little string stack down here. I'll move that so you can see it better. So the little string stack down here is counter melodic to what the flutes are doing up here. All that means is that when you put them together, they make sense. This little violin thing happening down here is, once again, constant, but easily picked out little descending theme. Once again, we're not dealing with ascending things very often, an amount of hope we don't have. Dealing with this very recognizable, like, sweeping but simple descent, especially in strings, but we're not so worried about instrument here. This melodic theme is what I gave to Kellic. In my brain, where all of this makes sense. I gave this little descent to him. And this comes back in different instruments. It comes back in different characters that he's talking to. And it was fun to be able to bounce that around, especially because that descent is recognizable across keys. There's a lot of up octave violin movement here, especially in the first violins. It will often look like the first and second violins are playing the same thing, when in reality there's a fun little dotted line above the first violin part that's making it an octave higher. Violins can do that. I, a violin player, unfortunately know the realities of fourth and fifth position. It's high. It's not fun to play, but by golly does it sound cool when you do it. We're moving into the confession. If I can trigger an Apple ecosystem thing here. Guys, love is real. Once again, am I crazy? Yes. This was so fun to watch. It was so weirdly seated in the middle of everything else that was going on, but it was so oddly perfect in that sense. Like, we're for sure gonna die. There is no better time for this. So, I give this funny little descent to Kellic. And it'll bounce around a couple times, but this weird little playful thing that the flutes have going on, and Kellic's voice down here leads us into the big sweeping movement where love is real. So we're establishing these themes ahead of presenting them with full force. Holding this chord for tension, and into the big boy movement. Now that's going to repeat, so we'll talk about it. The first repeat and the second repeat are exactly the same. I didn't think to write a first and second ending. I just thought to write it so that it would work for both. Remember what I said earlier about we don't have enough hope for ascending movements in the flutes? Boy golly, don't we now. The flutes get to have this, like, super fun little high thing, this moment of, like, utter beauty and bliss and things that I can only ascribe to your favorite paladin with just an opaline heart. So they get to do this fun little thing. That's super high. It's gonna get higher. That last note is the only one that the software notes as difficult for a flute player to reach. I don't really believe that. I believe that there's a lot of notes here that are difficult for flute players to reach. But once again, this is a problem for the little MIDI instruments in my computer and not for real-life instrumentalists. Note that the flutes are a little quieter here. This is only because the mix on this part was really weird. I think the software notes that instruments should play louder the higher up they are, because, like, you would have to push more air out to get a note that high, embouchure-wise. Once again, not a wind player, but that's just my understanding. So I had to, like, make the flutes a little quieter because they were really overpowering absolutely everything else that was going on. Taking a moment to welcome back the brass, because I love a French horn. I really do. I abuse them in every sense of the word. The strings are not doing much important here outside of carrying the theme. This is the moment for the flutes to shine. The flutes and the wind instruments in general. The French horns get to have a lot of fun here. They are carrying, it'll play both of them at the same time, I believe. Yeah. They carry this little harmonic structure. Juicy chord right here. That's one of my favorite things to, like, pick out and listen for, are, like, little counter melodic lines that I was, like, feeling a little fun about when I wrote them. This French horn part in this part of the piece is, like, my favorite one, to listen for this little... It juices up the minor happening here in a really nice way. I don't know if you can, like, pick it out and hear it. That's really delightful to me. The French horns don't have incredible significance. They don't have, like, plot significance here. Musically, they bring this, like, wild scale and, like, sense of greatness that just not many other instruments do, I think. I love the French horn, man. The B-flat trumpet, All it's doing here is copying something that the cellos are doing just for sort of extra. Would I say French horns are statuesque? Thank you so much for asking. Absolutely. I would absolutely say French horns are statuesque. For any of you watching that are not fans of the show, A, fix that, and B, pick up the word statuesque. It's a good one. So this repeats. We move through this unit. This gets really crunchy at the end. The B-flat clarinets do something crunchy. That's crunchy. It doesn't sound great on its own. The French horns also do that. But in the context of the whole thing, it makes a little more sense. It's just a little bit of tension. The backbone of this entire movement is the bass thing happening in the contrabassoons. That's juicy. Does it sound like a foghorn? Sure. It also gets lost in the contrabass. I'm at the mercy of whatever the MIDI instruments sound like, which in the case of many softwares is bad. I lucked out with like some decent ones. There are some places where that performance is a little weaker. The contrabassoon was a late addition to this piece. I realized I needed more bass support, and making the contrabasses louder really wasn't what I wanted to do. So I picked out the contrabassoon and said, come here, just be a part of this club. Yeah, moving past this little movement. Once again, the flutes are now doing this National Geographic thing again. They're having this like fast, accelerated movement of like, oh my gosh, but also like sort of the beauty of the world, the butterfly, if you will. You'll note notes that a bassoonist shouldn't be playing, but you'll also note the ottava bassa down here. I was frankly lazy. The bassoon part here is a copy of the second French horn part. I copy and pasted it, and I did not bother to change the octave. I needed more support on that line, so I just threw a little ottava bassa down here, which moves it down a whole octave. Once again, notational nightmare, sue me. Moving into this movement, that little full force, little Killick theme comes back. And the flutes sort of fade out because now this is his moment. We're moving down. And we get to do that whole thing again. So almost every instrument is doing that. That's the movement that's important here. The French horns are carrying that quarter, half, quarter, 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 half. The French horns are holding down the fort here. That's another moment of like a little French horn counter melody that I really enjoy. This little movement right here. That's delightful to me. It's doubled in both the bassoon and the B-flat trumpet just to provide a little more movement than what is happening in the dotted quarter descent that the strings are doing. It just felt like it needed a little more movement, so in are the brass instruments coming to the rescue. Movement. Yeah. So the violins get their fun little moment where everything's cool. The viola also gets to join in. Shout out to the viola. And now, in this third and final part of this movement, the flute comes back in full force. We've seen this line before. This was in our prelude to this movement. So we've seen that before. We'll give this a listen through and then we'll talk about that. So what's happening here? The important thing going on here is that the violins are doing the exact same thing the whole time. They don't ever change from this little note, G, F sharp. They do that the entire time. What changes around it is the chord structure. It's slowly descending. So we start down here on this G and we're ending on this really delicious E flat. So we made a chromatic movement down. We moved the smallest we could down incrementally. So the chord is just lowering enough to make us uneasy, and then that last chord is like really sort of stomach turning. But the flutes get to come back and have their little thing. We welcome the oboe into its first sort of starshine appearance. The oboe is a controversial pick for a symphony orchestra, I think, because it has such a distinct sound that it is sometimes hard to put in if you don't want it to be the center of attention. It has like a nasally sound. Oh, I guess I'll just... It's very pretty. But the oboe gets a lot of hate. Let's go oboe, Faye says. You're so right. So yeah, the strings keep the same movement and the chord changes around them. So we're going down, going down, going down. One more. And now it's uneasy. Our big minor chord. So, welcome back to our military percussion, and welcome for the first time to the Carolyn Bells. A little, like, Hunchback of Notre Dame moment. Salix gets stabbed in the back. This beautiful moment is just slowly broken up by that realization. His face falls. Oh no. So very quick welcome back all at once. This like slow little slide off of sweet into ooh, and we hit that final chord. Knife to the back. And all that's going on here, the first little dregs of combat for Caldur. Not my boy Salix. That's how I felt, man. Emotional support sibling. As you can see by looking at it, this part is very sparse. There's not a lot going on. This is intentional. We just did a whole lot of movement in this last little thing. Almost every line is filled except for the percussion for obvious reasons. Now this all looks really empty in comparison. We've stripped away all the sound, all the grandeur, all the beauty, and all like the love is real from this moment. So love to the Carolyn Bells. They get to keep this little E because as we've been in E for the back half of this whole thing. So we get sort of a slower motion and the contrabass gets to keep the rhythm here along with the bells. So the opening dregs of like, oh God, what just happened? Welcome back to the AOR theme. Now we're in 4/4, so I had to write this a little more cleverly than I did the last time. We're in 4/4 because the military march just sort of felt right in common time instead of 3/4. We've strayed away from like the romantic little waltzy thing that was happening in 3/4, and now we're back into like cut and dry, straight time. So we welcome back the Agents of Repair, Venture Forth theme here in the French horns. This is one example of a time where I feel like the MIDI instruments were trying a little less hard to sound normal, but that's okay because we move on from this movement pretty quickly. But opening dregs of combat, sort of figuring out what in the military waltz, figuring out what in the world is going on. And welcome to combat. So, other than some really dissonant movement in the French horns, we have ramped up the tempo. The cello and bass are carrying this little like staccato movement, so they are making very short movements. Very, very short, very sharp. They're carrying the bass here. I can't tell you how long I agonized over making this little this little intro to the movement the exact right timing. I went through every incarnation. Friends and family, that's a dotted 30-second note. Simply no one uses that. But that's like the exact timing that I needed, and it took me an embarrassing amount of time to get that right. But this dotted 30-second leads us into this fun little movement, dregs of combat. Welcome back to the Agents of Repair theme. Echoed back and forth like a round. Once again, a very like Lord of the Ringsian chord alteration on that Venture Forth theme. It was fun to make this around once I realized that it could be because of the way that the Venture Forth theme is written. It's like we've got like a little fast section, then we break it down. So that allows us to do a round that can repeat on each other and stay out of time but in time with each other. So we get to have a little round between the French horns and the strings. Because there was a lot of group harmony in this fight. It was chaotic, but like they were on top of it. So, there was a point in the fight where they had gone through that opening set of guards, and they were like, oh no, this was in fact not the Fatal Reserve. The actual Fatal Reserve is on their way. And thus we introduce a thing that's going to stay with us for the rest of the piece. This little thing that the French horns are doing, right in this section. Friends and family, this is what I called the Fatal Reserve theme. They have this fun little octave descent, and then this like sort of uneasy scale movement. But there's something very like grandiose and official about that. Simple, but the chord movement was enough to set off everything else that was going on. So the Fatal Reserve makes their entrance. And now what we do here, we're repeating the Fatal Reserve theme we just had, but we're joining it with the AOR theme, because this point of the fight was very push and pull. There wasn't like a clear winner or loser. I mean, it was rough on both sides for a little while. So we get the AOR theme, running back as a counter melody to the Fatal Reserve theme. We're going to repeat that. Alright, so we've done some combat, we've done some fighting, we've done some beefing. For those of you that have seen the episodes, which I hope if you're watching you've seen the episodes, this upcoming part, where we see an ungodly amount of stacked strings, we're moving out of a fast movement and into a slower one. At this point, several people have gone down. We're getting to a point where the Oath of Vengeance thing is becoming incredibly relevant. We'll notice right here what's happening in the flutes, which we know who the flutes belong to. The flutes and the French horns are doing this little theme. Friends, you might recognize that as the little Celtic theme that was happening. It also happens in the French horns. At this point in the fight, there was a absolute clutch heal from Celtic that it brought like Valeris up, because Valeris was making death saves, and like, ooh, it brought a lot of people back from the edge. Clutch heal. So we give Celtic a little moment. I should have done my homework and went back and watched the episodes before this. Any gabbing I'm doing is off the gourd, just what I remember. But yeah, the little Celtic theme comes back as he gets, in my words, clutch heal. Now the strings are doing this funky little movement up very quickly into an uncomfortable spot. That's gross. The second violins are doing it too. So everyone has this little moment of tension. The B-flat clarinet is going down while the violins are going up. So we're very quickly approaching a critical point in this fight. Ascending. We lose that rhythmic section. Much slower now. So, we're going to talk about that. Welcome back to the flutes. The flutes are now getting a starring role. And what are they doing? The Fatal Reserve theme, friends and family. Fawson having gone. Flynn was after Meryl. Thess was on Thane. And that was gnarly. He had gotten some attacks off on them, and then it was immediately their turn afterwards. So they get the Fatal Reserve theme there for a second. Just enough to make us uncomfortable. And we welcome back the timpani for, I suppose, what I refer to as the heartbeat. The timpani is doing this little heartbeat thing. They're going to do it again in a second. And this is going to get faster and faster as we approach the end. The heartbeat gets quicker and quicker. This section, from here to the end of the piece, is Thessaly v. Thane. To kill or not to kill, that is the question. So they get the Fatal Reserve theme for just a second. The violins are doing some uncomfortable movement down here that's just making us uneasy about the chord structure. A lot of dissonance, a lot of crunch. And if you remember correctly, I say to myself, that round where Thane attacked Thess and vice versa, there was like a bit of conversation in there. A couple lines that like stuck out in my brain because I was like, oh my god, this master storytelling is happening in front of my face. The dialogue back and forth, Tess had asked Thane if he even remembered killing her mom. It was only business, it wasn't personal. None of them stick out to me. All of that like goadingly dismissive dialogue. So I give the Fatal Reserve theme back to the Fatal Reserve here in the French horns. So that bounces back and forth between Tess and Thane for just this little section. So she gets it at the top. Yes, Chad, you're getting it. You're there with me. And the Carolyn bells are keeping time with the heartbeat. So, at this point in the conversation, Devin had rolled the crit, and it was very clear that this was going to be very over very quickly. So, Tess hit the first strike, and then there was that, like, little moment of Kelly trying to talk her down, trying to convince them to give Thane to Ondale, because Vossum was already gone. This moment of, like, show mercy. A little bit of pleading from Kellic. We get his theme back in the B-flat clarinets and the trumpets just to double. So we get his theme back, and Tess mirrors it for a second. While his theme descends, hers ascends. They have this little mirroring moment, but those notes are converging. He's going down, she's going up. They're on the same page, but going in different directions. Once again, I'm crazy, and I think way too hard about things. But I remember Tess hesitating. They heard his plea, and were inclined to hesitate before remembering. So, we get Kellic's theme back just for a second before we begin the climb into the end. Guys, we're so close to the end of this. Our heartbeat is faster now. And once again, the flutes are getting the Fatal Reserve theme immediately after a little reconciliation with Kellic's theme. So, you might notice up at the top of the page, things are starting to get faster. 82, 84, 86, 88. We're getting ever so slightly faster. The heartbeats are getting closer together. And the flutes are getting back their Discovery Channel movement. So they're doing that. The strings are climbing up because things are getting scary. Carolyn keeps time. The clarinets are just doing this fun little thing. Climbing very slowly on the scale. Getting faster as we get closer to the end. So, another important thing to note. The flute movement, all of this. Once again, we bring back Kellic's little thing. That consideration. I believe Devin's line was, I hesitate, but I can't not see her face. And that sticks out to me because it was soul-crushing. The violins are climbing higher and higher, the tension is building. I can't not see her face. So we move through this whole section. The consideration is happening, the hesitation is happening. Heartbeat gets faster. Fatal Reserve. So, important things to note. Our heartbeat gets faster, we're moving faster and faster. Some important things happen in the last 5 bars. We bring back almost all of our themes. Outside of the AOR theme, we bring back everything at once, because in this moment, it was Thess, Thane, and the rest of the world. It, to me, felt like, someone in chat said earlier, like bullet time. Like, everything slowed down. Bullet time, time to consider. Time to see her face. Her name was Emery Gwynn. Ouch, knife to the heart. So, we speed up and speed up. The flutes are climbing. They bring back that little Kellic theme one last time, that glimmer of hope. But some important things are happening on this last page. The heartbeat gets faster. The Fatal Reserve theme is on full display. Thane has put down the glaive, is arms out, ready to meet his fate, and is practically begging her to do it. So we bring back the little Fatal Reserve octave jump. But we're also bringing back that original ascending theme, quarter half. So the oboe gets it, some other instruments get it. So we get to bring back that thing one last time, that little ascending thing that we started it all with. And then there's this fun little thing that happens that I imagined writing it as a conductor with like my little baton and like driving the baton in on those half notes to accent, so we get boom, bang. So it's fun little like loud pushes towards the end, and everything builds and builds and builds. And then our last little thing that happens, everything else fades out, and Thess gets the Fatal Reserve theme, Sword Through the Heart. So we'll move back through that whole section because it's important to me. Bell, heartbeat. Heartbeat gets faster. And the final chord to end it all. Bing bang. So the Carolyn bells also get that little Fatal Reserve theme just to accent it. They get the little, and that feels right. Every line is crescendoing here, so we're getting louder and louder towards the end, and that final hit is the loudest anything is in the whole piece. So we get louder. And guys, we made it through the whole piece, and Thane is dead. And that doesn't feel as good as it should, because, ooh, was that complicated. I love these episodes, and this arc was super cool, and we're still seeing the butterfly effects of it all, and I think that's super neat. I can move us back over so it can just be you and us, and not all these big scary notes on the page. Because it's big and scary. No one asked, but I did this on MuseScore 4, very popular software, also very free. Go download it, mess around, learn something. You don't have to be qualified at all to make something you're proud of, and anytime you try something new, you should be proud of yourself, I think. Thus ends my soapbox inspirational speech about following your passions and doing creative things, because I think it's so important. I love this community, and I'm so glad you all could make it. I had a lot of fun hanging out with you guys. I'm glad my computer didn't blow up, and we made it through this whole adventure together. I'm learning, just as everyone else is. So, thanks for being here. Thanks for learning with me. I'd like to do this kind of thing more often. It's not every day that I write 6 minutes of orchestral music, but sometimes I do cool things, and it was cool to talk to you about it. Agents supporting agents. Yeah, we're a union, actually. We have rights. Don't cross the picket. Look. We stand together on the side of caring just enough about the way that our dice are. But in true VF community fashion, I believe I can only end it by saying, bye, nerds.